Hi and welcome back, amazing parents. This week we're going to cover a topic that is going to be hugely practical for you. And I'm going to try and post a short video every day to explore this topic thoroughly because it covers so much. The topic that we're going to explore this week is empowering our children versus overpowering them. Most of the time as parents, we try to control our children from the outside, control their behavior with, like we talked about in the last video, either rewards or punishments or other coercive techniques to control them to do what we want them to do. And then we contrasted that with creating in them a code that we write on their heart with our words that causes them to be directed from within. So the tree of life empowers our children to be directed from within, and the tree of the knowledge is where we're trying to control them externally. And so we all want this, right? Because, I mean, honestly, your child wants exactly what you want. You want your child to grow up to be happy, functional, self-directed, self-controlled, self-sustaining. You don't want to raise a dependent, aimless, clueless, helpless adult that's always coming back to you for assistance, guidance, and help. But we have an epidemic of those types of adults in the world, and it's directly related to how they were raised. Like it or not, and I don't say this to be condemning, but children are a product of their upbringing. And that's actually good news for us parents because we literally can create the child of our dreams. And that's what this class is all about, empowering you to do that. So, how do you empower your child rather than overpower them? So overpowering, is, like I said, us trying to control them from the outside. So empowering, the first thing your child needs in order to be self-directed, to be empowered to live his life from the inside out rather than you controlling him from the outside, is he needs to know that he is separate from you. He needs to know where he ends and you begin. He needs to know what he's responsible for and what he's not responsible for. It's called boundaries. I don't know if any of you have read the very famous #1 best-selling book that's been around and revised many times called Boundaries. It was written by Henry Cloud, Dr. Henry Cloud, and Dr. John Townsend. It is a revolutionary book that is changing the lives of many people because its contents is so profound. I read the book 15 years ago for the first time, and it was life-changing for me. But changing your boundaries once you're an adult, I was 45 at the time, I read the book, is difficult. I mean, you've got ingrained processes that you're trying to shift. It's not easy. So much better to establish healthy boundaries in our children when they're young so that they can take responsibility for them instead of depend on you for everything. So how do we do that? Well, we talked about developmental stages a little bit in our last video. And one of the developmental stages that is terribly misunderstood is the terrible twos. Just because we call it that indicates that we do not recognize what is going on in this stage of development. I call it the terrific twos because this is when a child begins to understand that they're separate from you and that they have autonomy and that they can direct themselves and they have freedom and they're beginning to be able to, do more things. But remember, they're still in a completely receptive brainwave state. So they're still in that delta brainwave state where it's like they're asleep with their eyes open because their brain is in the same state up until about age 3, and they emit the same brain waves that you emit when you are sleeping. So they're not conscious. That's why we don't have conscious memory before age 3, about age 3, unless something traumatic happens. Sometimes people will remember that. So they're totally receptive. They believe everything you tell them. And that's why we have to, we're scripting, we're laying the foundation, and scripting their entire life in those first few years. And guys, if you can get this right when they're little, it's going to make the rest of raising them so much easier. That's my heart, is really to get new parents before they have time to mess it up. So, or to empower them to do it right. Let me put that in a more positive way. So, boundaries. The first experience that a child has with establishing his boundaries is when he is about 2 years old. And that is when, and a little younger than that even, when they start discovering the word no, that they can say no. And what they're actually doing is they're asserting that I'm separate from you and I have a separate desire and will, and I'm a different person and I don't agree with you. And it's actually a very healthy thing, because the most basic boundary that any of us have all through our life is the ability to say no. When you read that book by Henry Cloud and John Townsend, that's what they'll tell you. That no is the basic boundary, and so many adults have a hard time just saying no. And they do things they don't want to do. They get themselves into relationships, into job situations and relational issues that are just because they were afraid to say no. And it goes way back to that subconscious scripting when they were little bitty and coming up. Because what do we do when our kids say no to us? Well, we call it disobedience or rebellion, and we punish them for it. And so they're taught in their subconscious, asleep brain that just receives everything as fact. You have to understand, they can't filter, they can't judge, they can't decide whether something is good or bad, fact or fiction even. Everything comes in as fact. Remember the Santa Claus story? Or the analogy? That's why they believe in Santa Claus, because you tell them he exists and they're like, okay. So when you tell them they can't say no, it gets scripted into their subconscious, and then they have trouble saying no for the rest of their life. So what that does is that it opens the door up for people pleasing. Well, I'll just go along with whatever everybody else wants from me. I did that as a child, as an adult, and it was later in my life that I remembered actually making that decision that, well, if I just go along with what everyone wants, everyone's happy. Except me, right? Because I just let my boundaries down. Have at it. Have whatever you want. And what that does to a lot of women, they end up in abusive or controlling relationships. And at best, you become a people pleaser. And at worst, you can end up in a very dangerous situation. Think about your child even. If he is trained to think that he cannot say no when he doesn't like something, I mean, you can imagine situations he could be in where he just thinks he can't say no. And I know that we've all heard stories from adults who found themselves in situations, even when they were old enough to know it wasn't right, but they didn't have that ability just to say no. So then that begs the question, so what do you do when you tell your child to do something and he says no, but you need him to cooperate? Number one, recognize that his no is a good thing, like we just talked about. He's simply stating that he doesn't, he's really, and they say it all the time because they're just practicing it. Hey, I'm separate. I can say no. I can be me. Nobody can control me. You don't want your child to be controlled. You want him to be free. He wants to be free. Freedom's a good thing. It was for freedom we were set free. So, how do you protect his freedom and his boundaries and his ability to say no and still get him to cooperate with you? Well, let me give you an example. So let's say you tell your child, it's time to clean up and get ready for bed. And he says, no. And so what he's really saying is he's voicing a desire. I don't want to clean up and get ready for bed. I want to keep playing. Well, that's not a bad thing. It's a natural thing. But we have to guide our children in right behavior, not punishing them for their innocent desire for what feels good. Okay? So, rather than punishing them for their innocence, because they don't have a knowledge of good and evil, they don't have the cognitive ability, they're just being led by desire. And So just agree with him. Oh, verbalize what he's actually responding to. This does so much for a child because he can't tell you why he said no. He can't. It's a natural impulse, a natural response to wanting to do what feels good. But that's not socially acceptable, right? We have to train them in how to manage their desires, okay? That's your job as a parent, to train them in the way they should go, to lead them in the way of life. Well, it's not good to let a child just play as long as he wants, stay up as late as he wants, ignore you when you know it's time for him to go to bed because he needs to get his rest. So how do we guide them in the way of life without overpowering them and simply swatting him on behind and saying, time for bed, and hauling him off? And, or even worse than that, taking his toys, whatever, and calling his innocent behavior evil. So what you do is you agree with your child. I know you would like to play longer. I wish we could stay up. Empathize. I wish we could stay up and just play. Wouldn't that be fun? It would be. Let me help you clean up and we'll get ready for bed. And so you're acknowledging and honoring his boundary and his desire, his separate personhood. You're identifying his feelings and thoughts. You're explaining so much to your child in a simple interaction like that, because a child has no idea what's driving him. He has no understanding of feelings or choices or self-control or discipline. When I say discipline, by the way, I don't mean punishment. I mean just self-discipline, how to make yourself do what you need to do, like go to bed in this situation. So when you tell him, I know, and you empathize, you're not giving him anything to argue with. If you say, oh, yes, it is time to go to bed. Oh, yes, you do have to clean up those toys. And he says no, and you say yes, then you're doing what I call head-to-head parenting, and it's a battle. Then you can easily overpower your 2-year-old, right? You overpower him, you take away his freedom, you take away his no, you discount his desire, and you're teaching him all sorts of negative things about himself when you do that. So simply by coming alongside, heart-to-heart parenting, and linking arms with him and saying, you know what? I agree. When you agree with someone, they can't argue. So if you say, I completely understand that you still want to play. It looks like you're having so much fun with this puzzle or whatever they're playing with. I would love, how about, give them something to look forward to. How about if I help you finish that puzzle tomorrow? Or how about if we paint together tomorrow? And let's plan it right now that tomorrow after school, or tomorrow after nap, you're talking about a 2-year-old, there's no school involved here. Tomorrow morning, first thing after breakfast, I'm going to sit on the floor with you and we'll finish this puzzle. And so you're communicating to him that you're on his side. You understand how he feels. You honor his desire, and you're allowing him to say no. You're not telling him the no is bad. You're saying, I understand your no. It's just not acceptable right now. But you're gently leading him in the way he should go by coming alongside, happily linking arms, being happy about it. Because here you are teaching and training your child. I mean, he's open. Once you get to this type of parenting where you're saying yes and he's saying no, they are so closed off to you. It doesn't matter what you say, but you're closing their spirit to you. So you don't have a way to get in there and write on their heart. They're pushing you out. So when you open your heart and you open your mind and you get a little knowledge and you come alongside your child and you say, let me explain to you, what we're going to do. And you just tell them matter-of-factly, oh, first of all, empathize. Always empathize with what they're feeling, what they desire. Because their desires are just for good things. Like I said, they want pleasure. We were wired for pleasure. God made us for pleasure. He wants us to have pleasure. He doesn't want us to struggle and have hard. Life isn't hard when we live in the Spirit. God has given us everything we need for life. So you're teaching your child to follow that path of life. where there isn't any resistance. So don't become the resistance to the path of life. Link arms with your child. Empathize with what he's feeling. Acknowledge that his desire is fine. You want to play? Playing is great. There's a time to play. Let's do it tomorrow. And then we'll put this over here for now. It'll be waiting for us in the morning, okay? All right, now let's get ready for bed so we can get up in the morning and finish your puzzle. And you'll be amazed at how easily you can lead your child in the path of life and protect his boundaries, which is so incredibly important. When you empathize with his feelings, when you honor his no, and you simply agree with what he desires, and then offer a solution that works for both of you. Right now, we'll get ready for bed, and in the morning, we'll finish the puzzle. So you're narrating for him what's going to happen, and in that narration includes his desire. It includes yours as well. So he's learning that there's a time for everything. Now, will there still be resistance? If you're developing a loving, nurturing relationship with your child, probably not. If you're just starting along in this journey, you might have a little bit, but just stick with it. Smile, be understanding, give him a hug, praise his work so far. Wow, that's an incredible puzzle you're working on. That's a beautiful picture. That tower's amazing. I can't wait to finish it. Now, let me help you get ready for bed. That we're in this together. You're not saying, okay, can we go? Listen to yourself as well. You know, you're always speaking in a way that says, we're just going to do this. I expect you to. There's no question in your voice like, I hope you agree with me. Is that okay? Don't ask for permission. Just tell him lovingly, gently, with confidence how things are going to go, and just make sure that you honor his feelings, that you include in your solution his desire. So you're honoring it. He's like, oh, mommy wants what I want. She's on my side. And every child needs to know you're on their side, but they have a separate voice. So I hope that helps you today. We're going to talk more about how to empower your child and give them skills for life rather than overpowering them and making them dependent on someone or something else to tell them what to do. So in this example, you're teaching him to delay gratification, which is something we need so badly in this world. So I hope that was helpful to you guys. See you next time.